let's go ahead and dive into the show and talk about this fall camp. Dabo had his interview yesterday, I think it was, and he had some updates on the teams as far as guys that are standing out and injuries and all sorts of those things, and we're going to get into all of it tonight. But one of the guys that he mentioned in a big way that was impressing him personally was Jahiem Lawson. He talked at length about Jahiem Lawson and the growth that he's seen over his time, not only at Clemson but prior to that. Everybody knows that Jahiem Lawson grew up in the Clemson area, spent a lot of time with the Sweeney family, was friends with his son and all that kind of stuff. So Dabo's kind of had a unique perspective on Jahiem Lawson due to all of those things. But Jordan, what were your kind of thoughts on Dabo's comments of Jahiem Lawson and kind of where he's at as we stand in week 2 of fall camp?
I mean, if you're a Clemson fan, I mean, it's got to be encouraging to hear that. So much of what we talked about last year, the struggles with the defense, came with the fact that you didn't really have a whole lot of functional depth at defensive end. That's why you moved Peter Woods to defensive end. And obviously his health was up and down throughout the season and limited his effectiveness at that position. So, one of the biggest things this offseason we talked about was building that defensive end depth. I mean, yeah, you bring it and will help. And I think that certainly is going to raise the floor of this group a good bit, inserting him into the starting lineup and gives you a second guy opposite TJ Parker that allows you to put Peter Woods back on the inside, and you have a more complete 4-man front. But you still got, they can't play every snap. I mean, you got to have guys that can go in and play. And, Jahiem Lawson is a guy in particular that was very much a developmental guy. Dabo talked about it. Coming in, he was a 3-star, athlete, really undersized, 6'2", 210 pounds, I think he said when he came in. He wasn't as naturally built like his brother was. And so, he's been a guy that's just kind of been slow cooking in the system and getting stronger, getting, more experience. And, last year I thought, I think something started to click towards the back end of last season. I think you saw him in some limited reps, be really explosive. I mean, he's a very, very, very twitchy kid. That's one thing. He's a great athlete. And that's what was so exciting about him when Clemson first signed him. It's like, man, 3-4 years down the line, like we could see him really be a really, really effective pass rusher. But now he's gotten stronger. He's bigger. He's 260 pounds. You feel better about placing him in a situation where he might have to set the edge and not just be a pass rush specialist. I think it's exciting and really encouraging to hear, because you're going to need him. I don't think there's any world where you rely solely on TJ Parker and Will Help this year and you're going to be able to stop the run the way you want to. You're going to have to be able to plug in guys because God forbid an injury happens. You need to be able to play some functional, get some functional snaps from some other guys. So Jahiem Lawson continuing to take that next step in his development is really, really exciting. I think we're going to see a lot more from him this year, and Dabo seemed to confirm it. Like, when you listen to Dabo speak, you kind of have to parse through some of the things he says, because he's going to be very complimentary about a lot of guys. But you can kind of tell the difference in his tone and the length at which he speaks about certain players that makes you like, okay, they're really seeing something here. And all the reports have been that Jahiem Lawson has been one of the more consistent guys in camp. And that is extremely exciting, because if you have a starting caliber player coming off the bench, that changes the complexion of the room, and it takes some of the pressure off your actual starters. It gives more opportunities for them to kind of take a breather. You can rotate guys in and stay fresh. And it's also just good for the competition. You got younger guys in that room that are also going to be, vying for playing time. Darian Mayo was mentioned. Ari Watford coming off a torn ACL. I mean, I don't know how much he's going to play, but he's going to practice. We're going to see him a good bit. So, I think all of those things you have to keep in mind, and why, one of the biggest things for Clemson's defensive end room is having a guy like Jahiem Lawson take that next step and become a starting caliber football player.
Yeah, absolutely, Jordan. And this is extremely encouraging from a depth standpoint, because entering fall camp, let's be honest, one of the, not as glaring questions, but one of the questions entering fall camp for Clemson was the depth at that defensive line position. We felt really good about the first two guys that are going to run out there, and TJ Parker and Will Helt, and that's all great. But again, like you mentioned earlier, you're one injury away from being in the exact same position you were in last year, right? So with the development of these guys behind TJ Parker and Will Helt, specifically Jahiem Lawson, is music to the ears of Clemson fans. And this is a guy, as you mentioned, that's been in the crock pot. He's been brewing for a long time. He's put on 50 pounds since he's been at Clemson. That just speaks to the grind that this guy's been on since he came to campus. And he's looking to really transform himself this season into an every down defensive end, and not just a pass rush specialist. And that's going to be the step that we are looking for Jahiem Lawson to take this year, and we'll see how he performs on the field. Fall camp, it seems that the returns from fall camp are extremely promising, and that he's having one of the better fall camps out of all the guys, and that's extremely encouraging, and couldn't happen to a better guy. Really excited about him, and you kind of saw him last year, especially towards the end of the season. He started to kind of come into his own a little bit. You could see the growth and the development from the start of 2024 to the end of the season, and just kind of the steps that he took forward. Obviously, he had more growth to do, and that sounds like that's what's happened this offseason. So I'm really excited about Jahiem Lawson. I'm really excited about the rest of the guys in that room. We heard from Cade Denhoff. The media talked to him a little bit. He's looking better. So we'll see what kind of steps he can take forward. And then, Darian Mayo, obviously you mentioned him. What kind of role is he going to kind of round out into? But, as you mentioned, this is a maybe not as talked about as other positions, but this is an extremely big deal for this Clemson Tigers, and how how good this defense can be this year with that quality depth developing behind your starters at the defensive end position.
Yeah, I mean, and you always want to root for a guy that, a legacy kid. Like it always, there's always that extra, tug at the heartstrings, like from a sentimental standpoint, when, you have guys that have been Clemson family basically their entire lives. I mean, Jahiem, growing up in the Clemson area, and his brother leaving the legacy he did, and all the connections he has. It just, you want him to succeed, and it's exciting, because if you get the best version of Jahiem Lawson this year, that changes a lot for the complexion of this defense, and it makes everything else so much easier on the staff, on the defense as a whole. If you can get some really high level snaps, and it doesn't, you don't need him to play like 40 snaps a game. I mean, but if he can give you like 20 snaps every game of quality reps, I mean, that takes so much pressure off of Will Helt, off TJ Parker, and the interior guys. So, I mean, it says a lot, that, and it could say a lot if we do indeed get that version of Jahiem Lawson this year. Yeah.
Also, just to kind of put a bow on this, shout out to Jahiem Lawson, because what he's doing at Clemson is not easy. You mentioned that he's a legacy Clemson guy, and coming in to a place where your brother left the legacy that he did, and playing the same position as him, that's not easy, man. No. And it wasn't like he was an instant success, right? Some of the things that came easy to Shaq Lawson doesn't come easy to Jahiem Lawson, right? So he's really had to grind and work maybe a little bit more than Shaq Lawson ever did at Clemson. So it's really refreshing, as you mentioned, to see Jahiem Lawson he's kind of coming into his own now, and I think this is going to be a really big season for him, and I'm excited to see what he looks like on the field for the Tigers in 2025.
100%. It's going to be fun to watch.